Greetings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome to one of a series of sessions with the 7 nominated candidates for election to the office of Bishop of the La Crosse Area Synod ELCA. I'm Steve McDougall, Synod Vice President and Chair of the Committee for the Bishop election. As part of the election of a bishop in the La Crosse Area Synod, candidate forums must be held. Since it is still against medical advice for us to gather in person for such forums, the Synod Council authorized the committee to develop a substitute. This series of videos, one with each of the 7 nominees for bishop, is the first part of that substitute. Our thanks to Professor Eddie Kim of English Lutheran Church for bringing his technical expertise to producing these videos, and to Reverend Barbara Brunau for making all of the arrangements for our video productions. Each of these sessions will consist of 2 segments: an opening statement, followed by responses to 3 questions written by the committee and shared with the nominees. The same questions are being used in all 7 video sessions. The nominated bishop candidate appearing in this session is the Reverend Elizabeth Libby Howe. Reverend Howe was ordained in 2002. Since 2009, she has served as assistant to the bishop and director for evangelical mission in the La Crosse Area Synod. She is a member of First Lutheran Church in Onalaska. Reverend Howe holds a bachelor's degree from the College of Worcester in Ohio and a Master of Divinity degree from Trinity Lutheran Seminary in Columbus. She also has had extensive training in spiritual direction, mediation skills, family emotional process, community organizing, public policy, and human emotional development. Before coming to the Synod office, Reverend Howe served as pastor at DeSoto and Freeman Lutheran churches and as a program director at Lutheran Outdoor Ministries of Ohio. Reverend Howe also serves as a member of the La Crosse Lutheran Campus Ministry Board of Directors, the Faithful Innovations Project, and the ELCA Macedonia Project. She works with the other directors of Evangelical Mission in Region 5, serving as their dean for several years. As assistant to the bishop, Reverend Howe managed the congregational call processes in the Synod. Reverend Howe, welcome, and thank you for answering God's call to be a nominee for bishop of our Synod.
Thank you so much, Steve. It is good to be with you this evening. And I just want to say thank you also to Dr. Kim and to the whole Bishop Election Committee, to the Synod Assembly Planning Team, and all the work that I know is happening to lead us to our election in June. For an opening statement tonight, I wanted to start with a Bible verse that has meant a lot to me over the years, and that is one that I'm sure is familiar to many people. The Great Commission at the end of Matthew chapter 28, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." Jesus said that to his disciples before he ascended into heaven. And it's been a verse that has carried me for many years. But I wanted to especially talk about how this past year has changed my perspective of this verse, particularly that word disciples, because I feel like this COVID time has asked the church, in fact, asked all of us to think about how we are Jesus's disciples in ways we never imagined we would have to, and what it would look like to be the church, and what that would mean for the world. And So one of the things that has really compelled me about this verse recently has been the word disciples, by meaning learner. That to go make a disciple is to go make somebody who can learn to follow Jesus, who can learn more about what that means. And I think that's the moment we're in as a church. It's a learning moment for all of us. And the reason I wanted to open with that is because I suppose the elephant in the room or sorts for me in this process is that some may think that I'm a known entity, someone who's been in the Synod office for a long time, and there is truth to that. I know things and you know things that because we've worked together for a long time, but I also believe that there's still a whole lot to learn about one another. And I will approach this process and have so far, trying to suspend those things that I think I already know and to be curious about our congregations and our leaders so that I can approach being a bishop with some fresh eyes and in a new way ready to learn from you. So, and I also invite you to do the same for me, that there's always more to be learned about one another. So thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. We move on to Pastor Howe's responses to 3 questions of general interest. These questions were shared with Pastor Howe beforehand. These same questions are being asked of all the nominated candidates, and we've set a 20-minute time limit for this segment. Pastor, number 1, what are your gifts and strengths as a religious leader, and how do you apply them to the demands of being our bishop?
I think my greatest gift is the gift of faith, and that is so core to being a religious leader. I grew up in the faith. My mom and dad took me to church, and it has been something that's been a part of my life for many years. My faith has been tested by trials and tribulations in my life, by griefs and pains, and my faith has only deepened and grown as I've served as an ordained minister in the church. So first of all, I think my faith in God is probably the biggest, when I think about that gift and strength for being a bishop, meeting the demands of being a religious leader, that needs to be really solid, and I believe mine is. I believe I also have the gift of encouragement. As I've worked with leaders in congregations and synod committees over the years, one of the things I have enjoyed doing so much is encouraging people to do usually what they already know they need to do, and perhaps even already have the capacity to do, but just need an extra nudge of encouragement that gives them the permission and the support and the courage to do what has to be done. In congregations, I've seen that when things that have to be done might be hard, like helping to create an environment that's safe, where people aren't expecting criticism all the time, that a committee, a council can learn how to create an environment, a culture in their own setting by drawing boundaries about what's appropriate and what isn't for their community, that makes for an environment where good ministry can flourish. So that kind of encouragement for lay leadership, I think, is something that I've grown in my skills and abilities to do. I love being a pastor. And in this synod, I think because of our size and our accessibility to one another, both geographically and relationally, the bishop is first and foremost the pastor to the synod. And the gifts of a pastor that I excel at, I think, are pastoral care, seeing things that others may not see and noticing, and then, and in fact, being in the pain and woundedness when people are there in crisis. And so being a pastor is a great joy of my life. I've always approached even my work in the synod office, which a lot of people wonder, how is that the same as the work of a pastor in a congregation? it's different, but being a pastor is still very core to what I've been. And finally, I really liked I loved the question, the way it was phrased by saying religious leader, because the word religious means to connect to. It's from the same root where we get ligament. And so religious is to connect people to God and to one another. And that is the work of a bishop, is to build those places of connection, not to do all the work, but to build teams and to see that the work gets done. So.
Thank you. Number 2, how do you understand the role of bishop as a servant and the one who wears the big cross?
When I first heard this question, I thought that it was, and I was mistaken in this as I listened and prayed about it, but I thought that it was putting those two things in opposition with one another, that if you're the servant, you're not the authority, or if you're the authority, you're not the servant. And that's never been how I've understood the role of bishop. The bishops that I've watched and been close to, carrying the authority of bishop is how they serve. And that's the way I would want to model, who I would want to model my own leadership after. The bishop, in many ways, does things that we need someone in the church to do, but those things are often harder, and not harder in terms of effort necessarily, but often larger, more complicated, larger scale situations. There's no playbook for bishop, and situations and circumstances come to them all the time that they've never seen before. And I think the servant aspect of being a bishop is to show up each day for whatever may come, and to believe that God can speak to whatever situation arises, whether that's a crisis or a natural disaster. And in many ways, a bishop is responsive, and that's their servant life, is to be responsive to really difficult situations that our congregations, that our ministries, that our pastors and deacons face each day. So that willingness to show up, I think, is how I imagine the servanthood of the bishop, as well as being willing in that space with the big cross, to use that language, to be the authority that sometimes will have to say difficult things, that will help to lead a congregation to close, if that's where God is calling that congregation, to help a congregation to begin a new start, to deal with issues like misconduct among leaders, so that we protect our spaces from the way that sin and brokenness can be very much a part of our life as the church. So in all of those ways, there's authority invested in the bishop to do those things, and that authority is their service to the church. Oftentimes I feel like that authority is, or that servanthoodness isn't seen, or is misunderstood, and the bishop allows for that sometimes too, because there are things a bishop has to do that cause scrutiny to themselves, and they take that on so that others in situations don't have to. So those are the ways that I see a bishop serving and using their authority to do that.
In the secular world, servant and leader are opposites.
Yeah.
You see them as complementary in the service of the church?
I do. I see that as pastors as well. And indeed in Jesus himself. I mean, we just came through Holy Week, and the mandate of Maundy Thursday, you call me master and friend, and if this is how I've done to you, and he washes their feet, then you also ought to do this for one another. That's leadership as a follower of Jesus, is to be a servant. and to look for ways to serve our neighbors.
Number 3, what hill have you defended in your ministry so far? Or would you be willing to defend and die on as bishop? That is, what is worth losing your call over?
So, so I want to talk a little bit about the word call in that last phrase of the question. I tripped up on that a little bit because what I think is being asked, and maybe you can help me understand if I'm not, is what would you feel so passionately about that you would be uncompromising with and lose your job? Is that how that is?
Technically, yes.
Okay. And the reason I need to clarify that is because I'm pretty sure that if I felt that passionately about something, I would use language of call to talk about it, that I feel called to do that action and to, even if it meant losing my job. So that's why I wanted to clarify. The reason I smile a little bit when this question gets asked is because this was a question that we discussed in my senior leadership class when I was in seminary. And with all of my confidence or naivete, sometimes those mask as one another, I really wanted to believe that this would not have to happen. And not because I didn't think anything was worth it, but because I really believed that any situation that arose, we would be able to work it out. We would be able to, so if there was a conflict in the congregation, I tend to be more of a peacemaker, a mediator. I like to resolve conflict, and I'm willing to stay in it until we reach a resolution. So I figured if I was able to do that, that we would never get to that place of impasse where I would say, wash my hands of it and say I had to leave or be asked to leave. And I lived with that delusion for a while until I was in a parish, and we were in a situation where there was a disagreement about who would have access to a certain part of our facility, and that would children be allowed in this new beautiful space or not? And there were some who were very, very strongly believed that in order to keep that space nice, that certain people shouldn't be in there, or that we should be very careful and protective of it. And that was, I remember going home one night and after a council meeting and standing in the parsonage living room and wanting to call my seminary professor back from 4 years ago and say, I figured it out. I know what it is now, because I could not imagine myself yielding this, that we would say that a certain part of our community was not allowed in a certain space in our building. And that's very specific. I mean, I had that happen. But what it gets to for me is the core that was touching for me was that it would have been the same as saying to that population, to children, or that they didn't have the same value as other people in the community, that they didn't matter as much, and that they didn't deserve the same nice facilities to be in. And that became a thing I realized I'm pretty uncompromising about, that in the church, and this is something we give to the world, is everybody matters here. And the way we behave, the way we do ministry together needs to communicate that truth, that in God's eyes and therefore in ours as a community, everybody has value, and we're going to treat people with that dignity and with that value. So I think that is what fires me up, or is a core that I lead from. there's a personal aspect to that. There was a time when I didn't believe I mattered, and a pastor told me I did, and it made all the difference. It was the beginning of hearing my call to ministry. So my fight for my activism now, the way I talk on behalf of people who are poor, minorities, people who are just getting the short end of the stick all the time, being told by the world that they are less than, that all of that is what is so elemental to my sense of call and what it means to be a follower of Jesus. That's what Jesus did. So that's what we do as the church, is we see people who are unseen, and we go to people who no one else wants to go to. And we believe not just that we can help them, but that they are valuable, that they have value in this world for us. We have things to learn from them as well. So that's the hill I would die on, so to speak. But I want to say one more thing, if I can, about dying on hills. I don't think it's something we should go around doing all that often. That it's really, the truth is, Jesus died on the hill so I don't have to. And there's so many things that turn into those moments, especially in our polarized and divisive and kind of inflammatory world right now, that shouldn't get to that point. And it's up for us as a church to discern when it should, and how we live out those difficult moments of dying on hills with love. Jesus went to that hill because of his great love for the world. And so whatever hill I would die on, the real litmus test for that is, am I doing it because I love Jesus and because I love people? That would have to be the guide, or that would be the question I'd have to ask myself. Or is it about my own ego, or about my own personal agenda, or a vendetta, or any other thing? It would always have to be because of love. So.
Thank you, Pastor Libby Howe. Your participation in this video will help members of the Synod Assembly in the election to come.
Thank you.
Friends, please be sure to view all 7 of these videos now available on the Synod web pages. Also, there will be one more video session involving all 7 nominees, which will be available before the Synod Assembly. Thank you for watching, and may God bless us all.